All right. Happy Monday and welcome to another episode of A Day with Dre. As you know, I'm your host, Dre. And as usual, we're going to talk about some things both heavy and light, typically focusing on, some of the issues that are plaguing society, whether it's based on my own experience or shared experiences amongst others. But before we even get too deep in that, remember to please like, subscribe, share anything you like from this podcast. It's available on all platforms, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcast, TikTok, clips, Instagram, Reels, Shorts on YouTube. Wherever you take in your digital media, I will have some sort of content available. So again, any like, any comments, any sharing, remixing, etc. All that does is help grow. I'm sorry it's been a while, but we're back, and that's what counts. But again, before we get into it, please like, subscribe, and that'd be greatly appreciated. All right, thank you. So, it's the summer, and when I was home, I was starting to wonder if I had been romanticizing what society used to be like when I was younger. Like, was it actually better? Am I romanticizing it? Are we cooked? Is society cooked? And not because of the kids, not because of just boomers or anything like that. It's like, are we collectively just cooked because we're all collectively just running this thing into the ground? And when I say society, I'm talking about on all levels. And I guess depending on what level we're talking about, whether that's like your local community, your interpersonal relationships, or just like country level, whatever. It seems like the institutions that kept us advancing and going forward are all collectively taking a step back. And what I mean is, like, when I was a kid, there was a greater sense of community. And I don't mean like everyone looked the same and acted the same sense of community, because I think having diversity in your community is a key to having a great community. But and a lot of people, they'll say, "Well, this is a Democrat thing. This is a Republican thing. This is we're letting too many immigrants in. We're doing all of this stuff that very minimally any reason at all that your community is changing." I think leadership, of course, has a play in it, because our I don't think leadership on any level has advanced with time the way that they should. We're still trying to run the government in the same way. There aren't enough people that want it to be ran in the same way that it was uh 250 years ago. And as the world progresses and society changes, I think the way you govern that place also needs to change. But whatever, that's the whole thing we'll get into at another time. But yeah, before I keep getting off on that tangent, am I romanticizing the old days, the mid 2000s, early 2000s? I'm a millennial. I'm old enough to remember the 90s. And before we get too caught up in blaming it on like the youth, we got to remember who's raising them. My parents aren't boomers, but a lot of people my age have boomer parents, and they raised us. And people in my generation or the generation just before me were the people that have raised a lot of these kids, Gen Z or Gen Alpha. So what is the reasoning for this? And I think if you stop and reflect and start to think about some of the things that are wrong with society, I think if we just get to the basics, and I'm going to use some terms that, you maybe haven't heard since a communication class in high school or college, whatever, but let's talk about interpersonal communication and the lack of interpersonal communication. But before we really dive deep into interpersonal communication, like if you just really think about society, like just sit and think about it, and even in your local community or, your internet community, however you look at it, and you got to ask yourself, when did it become cool to be cruel again? Because if we're talking about history and human nature, we've always been cruel, right? I mean, we literally create laws against people, kill people because of their religion, etc. I felt like we had gotten to a place where, at least in our country, America's always been cruel to people all over the world, but at least in our country, we had gotten to a place where we were kind of like, maybe you shouldn't treat people like this, maybe, or if you did, because America's always going to have people that it's going to have as second-class citizens, but they at least had to hide it, right? You had to mask it. You couldn't just have Jim Crow laws anymore. You had to be creative with how you're going to be cruel to people, because most people were like, wow, that's wrong. Like, you shouldn't do this to people just because their skin's this shade or they worship this god or whatever. But right now, it's like people will say stuff and put their name on it and advocate for poor conditions or terrible conditions for people just because they're not the ethnicity that we like or from the country that we like, or they don't worship who we like. And people are putting their name on it. I mean, you can start a YouTube channel or a Reddit thread that's purely discriminatory, and lots of people will support that. And we've always had bigoted people, but once upon a time, you had to at least be bigoted at home, right? Got to a point where it was like, you can't stand on this. You got to say this shit at home. And while I personally like when a bigot identifies themselves publicly, I think the bigger issue is that there is no systemic repercussions, right? Like, yeah, maybe you say something. It's like these 20v1 things that go on. I don't remember his ethnicity, but he wasn't a white guy. And he was arguing with all of these guys that were, anti-immigration, anti-race mixing, all this kind of insanity. And one of the guys, yeah, they got fired from their job, but then immediately put up a GoFundMe and got more support, financial support, than he ever would have gotten for his job. And like, when did we get to a place where people are so open and comfortable with supporting people that are just straight up, I don't know, straight up racist, straight up bigoted? Because we did get away from that, and now we're just right back in it. And, when you're supposed to be the moral compass of the world, like America likes to claim to be, I think openly supporting bigotry and things that are related to bigotry, misogyny, racism, just openly being xenophobic, that's literally the opposite of what the United States is supposed to be. If you look online and if you use Twitter or X, like I do, people are manufacturing rage. Like, there's something that came out, I'll see if I can find it and post a link to it, but like 75% of the users on X are like AI or bots, because it's just manufacturing rage and allowing people to just be nasty and mean to each other. And I think what's allowed us to regress in our ways of dealing with each other is the rise of maybe communicating with each other virtually, or the lack of interpersonal communication. So like I was saying, society seems to have been collapsing on all different levels, and a lot of this is based on observations. And I will bring in some stats, or if I won't go over the stats myself, but I'll link where there's statistic signs of lack of interpersonal communication, which is leading to some societal regression. But of course, you don't have to agree with me, but this is my podcast, so you can, for whatever it's worth, not listen, or you can hate listen. I don't really care. But what is interpersonal communication? And that's, that's how you talk, how you exchange information, thoughts, feelings, etc. with another person, another group of people. That's interpersonal communication, is both verbal and nonverbal. And I think one of the important things that we've lost with this increasingly digital world is we're still able to, speak to people, text people, etc. But we've lost so much nonverbal communication. And nonverbal is like, what is your body language like? What are your facial expressions like? What's the tone of your voice like? What are your gestures like? What are your gestures like? And that stuff is important, because depending on how your voice sounds, depending on your facial expressions, or for an example, even how you text people, like some people will take too much punctuation. That's nonverbal. Too much punctuation implies that maybe you're upset with them. Like, those things matter. And I think as we become more and more digital, we've really lost how to properly use nonverbal communication. And also, we're so, the preference is to not speak to people, to not see people when you're talking to them. And I think that's allowed all this comfort and all these people that never existed before, right? Once upon a time, you knew if you said something crazy about a group of people, you might have to see someone from that group of people. Now you can just post a clip online and you're just one of 1,000 people trying to rage bait online. And, your communicating skills are gone, because you're not actually communicating with a person. You're just putting something out there, and then maybe other people will engage with it, but there's no closed loop communication. And we've lost that closed loop communication. We've lost a lot of the say this to you, I watch how you respond, and then you say something back to me because we're not having conversations. But once upon a time, that was the minority of how you talked with people, because what you write them a letter, you send them a text. But for the most part, and like people my age, like we grew up, we had to talk to people. We had to talk to people in person. And the majority of the way you communicated with people was in person. You talked to people at school in person. It wasn't just, you could say something digitally. I heard that people don't even ask each other to formals or proms anymore in person. And like, that's something that used to matter. So when you can say stuff to people and not have to worry about their body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, you just basically, you lose the humanity in it. And that's an issue. So technology advancing has kind of hurt interpersonal communication because technology is advanced, but we haven't advanced with it. We use these tools, and I think humans need those nonverbal cues, which is why video podcasting is becoming so much more popular, which is why FaceTime is becoming so much popular. Phones all have front-facing cameras now, so you can see people when you're talking to them. COVID absolutely wrecked interpersonal communication, especially for the kids that COVID kind of took 2 years away from school and very important formative years. Those COVID kids, they almost don't know how to act in society because they weren't around people. They weren't able to see people. And we can talk about this point in the next episode, because I'm going to talk about like personal communications and personal relationships, but also I want to talk about like how society has kind of hurt people from a systemic standpoint. And that's also contributed to the loss of being able to communicate with people normally. But what I do think is unfair is that Gen Z gets most of the blame. A lot of people will look to Gen Z, and I've even done it myself. And what's Gen Z? That's like the late 90s, like, 97, 98, 99, whatever, up into roughly 2010. And that's like the generation that, the first generation to truly like grow up with like phones in their face and high speed internet all the time. And they're the ones that maybe kind of started off with bad communicating skills, not able to have conversations with people, prefer talking to people online, etc., like that. Whereas I think most of us that are older maybe turned into that as it became more convenient, but that wasn't how we were brought up. But with Gen Z, that's just kind of the world they were born into. But at some point, as the generations that came before them, I'm a millennial, Gen X, whatever, the boomers, we do have to take some type of accountability for what, for the culture of the youth, because we are the people that raised them. What did we do for our siblings? You got kids now that, they text people in the same house as them, but where did they learn those habits? Like, instead of just going upstairs and talking to your mom, walking somewhere and talking to your brother, talking to your sister, they'll send a text and say, is the food ready? Right. But as parents, as siblings, as, uncle, auntie, whatever, we allowed it because I don't think we realize that these people are losing the ability to communicate effectively with each other like humans instead of through machines. So I don't know, just something to think about. And with this lack of interpersonal communication, I think people are losing the ability to relate to each other, to feel empathy for each other, to connect with each other. But I think our desire to have those things still exists, and maybe might exist more than ever. But it does seem like we've become more selfish than we ever have. So everybody really has this desire to be so seen, heard, felt in every situation all the time, and not literally every person, but it seems like it's becoming more and more of the norm instead of the exception. And we have set up these spaces for people to always feel like what they're feeling, what they need to be heard, they need to be seen, they need to be felt. And I think that's part of this ongoing societal problem. And this might make me sound like a boomer, but not everything is for everyone. You don't need to be a part of every conversation, and people in every scenario don't need to see you. We all have our little sub communities and subgroups that we're a part of and that we're pillars in, but Sometimes you just don't fit in a conversation. Sometimes you just don't fit in a group. And just because you're a person and alive doesn't mean that you should be in every room with every person and in every conversation. You don't always need to be seen, heard, or felt. Sometimes you need to know when to shut up, both literally and figuratively. You know, you're you're not meant to be a part of every scenario, a part of every social group, a part of every status, and that's fine. But people want to be a part of everything, but at the same time they set up these hard boundaries and simultaneously want to be thought about. Like for example, you'll have people that, like, if you have a group of friends that enjoy a specific activity, like for example, I have friends that enjoy seafood. I don't like seafood, but you have people that will make this group of people that really want to experience this thing, or even if it, let's say it's your significant other, they want to go to, they want to go get a boil. I don't like it, but you know what? I'll still allow them to enjoy that. And I'll just find something else on the menu, because that's part of being a mature adult and communicating with people that are important to you. And it doesn't even have to be a person important to you, but instead people will be like, you know what? I don't like that. I'm not comfortable with that. So I'm not going to do that. And okay, that's in your right to do that, but that's also in those other people's right to be like, okay, well, we'll do something else together another time because we really want to do this. That doesn't make them a bad person. And you know what? If you really love and care about those people or want those people to enjoy something, you can accept that and you can do something different together another time. But don't keep people from doing things that they enjoy, or you go home and hope that they don't enjoy something because you don't enjoy that thing with them. But we've literally become so selfish that people would rather the whole group not enjoy something than you maybe say, you know what, I hope you guys have fun. I'll catch you next time. Or even the gesture of saying that might be more likely, it might make it more likely that that group of people say, you know what, well, we can do this at another time, but I want you to come with us for insert activity. Because seriously, when's the last time that you've done something for someone that's important to you that you didn't really want to do, but you knew it would really make that important to them? You know, people do that for their children, but when's the last time you've watched a show with someone that you didn't love, but you knew that they liked it? And for example, we're talking about interpersonal communication, especially when that person knows that you don't enjoy something, but you enjoy your time with them. That means a lot to that person. And maybe instead of making you sit and watch a marathon of something, they watch an episode and then they say, you know what, let's watch something that you like. People do that for their children. But when's the last time you've done that for your significant other? When's the last time you on a Sunday, football's coming on, and maybe you know your significant other doesn't like football. So you watch one game instead of watching Sunday morning through Sunday night. Now, of course, if they're saying, you know, that's okay, we can watch it together, that's one thing. But also you can't be mad if they don't want to watch it with you. And again, I know these aren't like, these situations don't apply to everybody, but the point remains is, when have you either directly or indirectly done something for someone else or communicated something to someone else that it's not about me, it's about us, it's not about me, it's about you? And I think the loss of that has led to a substantial decrease in community, because all we care about is what we can do. Just because you're upset doesn't mean you can treat someone like shit. You can be upset, but how many times have you heard someone say, I'm upset, so I'm going to act this way? And it's like, no, just being upset doesn't mean you can act any way you want. Sure, your feelings are valid, but your behavior might not be. But we've just allowed society to get to a place where people can say what they want, feel what they want all the time. And then if there's a repercussion because of it, then we try to make it seem like someone is in the wrong for reacting to someone's shitty behavior. Who raised them? Who's raising Gen Alpha? Who, you know, we put people in this situation, and just because you can't hit your kids like maybe we used to get hit doesn't mean that there is no way to discipline them. That's part of communicating as well. You have to actually be able to communicate with people, talk with people, and put in the work. And people don't want to put in the work, whether that's emotional work. And of course, it's not all our fault. Society has changed a lot as well. And the downfall of safe spaces for kids and all of that is something that I want to talk about in another episode, because we're trying to keep these things short. But yeah, the loss of interpersonal communication is severe, but all I can speak about is what I see here. And people's ability to communicate with each other and be held accountable for things that they say and actually humanize conversation again is going to be extremely important in how, we deal with our children, grandchildren, etc. Being respectful, being kind isn't something that should be reserved for people that that should be the standard. And if you're not that, we should get back to the days of fuck around and find out. But unfortunately, we've gotten away from that. So anyways, I'm going to try to wrap it up here. But again, if you could drop a like, drop a comment, review the podcast, follow on all the socials. That's A Day with Dre podcast. And also send me suggestions for stuff that you want to talk and be on the lookout because the part 2 of this episode is going to be coming out soon. And I want to thank y'all for taking your time, just a short amount of your time for listening. And thank you for the suggestion on this topic. I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Peace.